Let's talk about the Planet of the Apes trilogy. What's good about it? Well, the style, tone, direction, cinematography, editing, score, performances, visual effects, script.
The story?
This trilogy shows the story of Caesar's life from birth until death. Caesar is one of the greatest cinematic characters of all time. This character and this trilogy would not be this successful without Andy Serkis. Was his performance amazing? Yes. Did it enhance the story and the movies in general? Yes. Should he have gotten an Oscar for his performance? Yes. Did he?
No!
It's incredible what they were able to pull off with the motion capture technology. Even in the first one, which came out in 2011. By the last movie, the visual effects were so good, I thought I was looking at actual apes that were acting.
Hey, boss, are you going to be talking about the original Planet of the Apes movies?
No, I haven't seen those. I've only seen the Andy Serkis ones.
Excuse me? How are you going to make a video about the Planet of the Apes when you haven't even seen all of them?
I'm just not talking about those ones.
If you really liked Planet of the Apes, you would have seen them all already. I've seen every single one of them and can easily explain the plot to you if you're gonna be a lazy piece of again. Who do you think you are? Hello? Anyone in there? Hello? Anyone know anything about apes? You've never seen the original? The original?
The original?
Okay, geez, I'll watch them.
The original Planet of the Apes movie was released in 1968, and this movie is f***ing amazing. I thought the apes were going to look really bad because it came out in the 60s, and old movies have bad effects. I like good effects that are made in a computer, like the Avengers, Justice League, Jurassic World, Star Wars. But the makeup and prosthetics actually impressed me. Now, they don't look as real as the apes in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but they still look pretty good. Those apes were fake, right? The apes are able to show a lot of emotion given the insane amount of they had on their faces. I was very impressed. The cinematography really stood out to me in this one. At the beginning, there's a really cool shot where the camera is on the front of the ship when it lands, and it comes through the window. That's so dope. The movie follows these astronauts who land on a planet 2,000 years in the future. The astronauts land and Jesus Christ, what the f*** is that? Talking apes are the dominant species, while humans are the animals who can't speak. The apes capture the humans and keep them in cages and experiment on them. The main character, Taylor, played by Charlton Heston, is the final survivor of the astronauts from the beginning, and he has this hilarious laugh. The first time we see the apes, they're capturing a bunch of humans, including Taylor, and it's a great scene. It's tense and thrilling, and there's not a single line of dialogue. Taylor gets captured after getting shot in the throat. This causes him to lose his ability to speak, so he seems to be just like all the other humans. Because they're all mute, remember? He meets this
hot girl,
Nova, and he attempts to escape, but then gets recaptured. Right as he gets recaptured, he regains his ability to speak.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
He becomes friends with two apes, Cornelius and Zira, who are fascinated by humans, and they're the only apes that try to help him. There's a courtroom scene, and it's one of the best scenes in the movie. It's probably the second best courtroom scene after the one in B movie. The production design was great too. Everything in the movie was practical, and there's some great stunt work too. The score is fantastic. It's haunting and eerie, and written by an ape. Apparently, the composer, Jerry Goldsmith, wore an ape mask while composing it to set the mood. Okay. This movie is great. It's smart, it explores deep themes, and it has great action. Also, the twist at the end shocked me so hard I sat in my room in silence just staring at the ceiling fan for 3 days. I had no food or water, and it ends with Taylor finding the Statue of Liberty all broken down on the beach.
Damn you all to hell!
Showing us that the planet he's been on the whole movie is actually Earth in the future. I highly recommend this movie if you haven't seen it yet. Beneath the Planet of the Apes is the sequel. It came out 2 years later in 1970, and this movie is insane. It starts out with a new astronaut, Brent, who looks very similar to Taylor, and then beat by beat, the exact same thing happens to him that happened to Taylor in the first one. He crashes down on the planet, gets taken by the apes, then escapes, meets Cornelius and Zira. Oh, and he's friends with Nova too. For a second, I thought it was a remake of the first one, but wait, Taylor is in the beginning, so it can't be. Taylor's there in the beginning, chilling with his girl Nova, and then he disappears into a mountain, and I was confused. It's like that for the first half of the movie, and then the second half is like a completely different movie. Brent finds his way to this underground fortress with these weird humans that can control his mind. They worship an atomic bomb that's set up in the middle of their little place. Then later, they rip their faces off, which turn out to be masks, and they're actually these weird mutant things with these nasty looking faces. What is that? What is that? They look like Darth Vader when he takes his helmet off. So when Taylor disappeared in the beginning, he ended up getting captured by these people, and Brent and Nova help him break out. Then Nova just dies, and then Brent gets annihilated by the apes that break in. Then Taylor gets shot, but before he dies, he hits the button for the atomic bomb, and the planet blows up. Like, Earth blows up. How is there another movie after this?
The world just blew up.
So the beginning was trash, but the ending was so insane I couldn't look away. It actually kind of saved the movie for me. Nowhere near as good as the first, but I was pretty entertained in the end.
So
after blowing up the planet in the second one, they decided they still wanted to make more movies, so they say Cornelius, Zira, and some other ape weren't on Earth when it blew up, so they're still alive. Apparently, they were on a ship that somehow takes them 2,000 years in the past to present-day Earth, which is 1971. Definitely a lot of plot holes right off the bat, but okay. I just don't see how that makes sense.
No. See, it does make sense. You just don't understand the logic. Okay. Let's say this is Earth, okay? And this is the ship that they were on. So they were here, and they blast off like this. And once they blast off, then the finale of the second movie happens. Then the Earth explodes while the ship is safe and out in the atmosphere, not being affected by the blast itself. So the ship ends up going back in time 2,000 years to the past. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense. Shut up. The actual mechanics of the ship were never fully explained, but you see, if this is where they were, and when they get blown up, they get sent back here to the past. So if they travel back to the past 2,000 years to 1971, then they are now in the past. Now the apes that came from here, they think it's weird that the humans are the main species because they're from here. But the humans that are from here, they think it's weird that these apes that are from here can speak because they're from here. See, so when these apes came to here, it was all strange. Now this is the present, that's the future. This is actually our present, so this is our past, and this is the apes' past as well. So it's the apes' past and our past, but the humans' present. Does that make sense? Yep, I was gonna say that too. Will you shut up? I don't know why he's here. Nobody loves you. Wait, but how did they travel back in time in that ship? In the first one, Cornelius and Zira couldn't even comprehend the idea of flying. Well,
This movie follows Cornelius and Zira in a fish-out-of-water comedy. It shows them getting famous because they're talking apes, and there's a goofy montage of them trying on human clothes and taking baths and stuff like that. It's kind of an inverted version of the original, where that one had humans land on an unfamiliar planet inhabited by apes, and this one has apes land on an unfamiliar planet inhabited by humans. After spending hours crunching numbers and memorizing algorithms trying to comprehend the logic behind the time travel, I decided to just let it slide for the sake of my enjoyment in watching the film. It's a completely different tone from the first two movies. There's some interesting dramatic moments and themes explored, but for the most part, it feels more like a spin-off than a natural progression of the main story. Oh, and I forgot to mention earlier that Cornelius and Zira are married, and they have a baby in this one, Caesar, who can speak. And then they all get shot and die in the end, because these movies always have to have a tragic ending. But then we see that the baby that was shot was actually a different ape, and their baby is still alive in the end, which sets up the next one. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes came out in 1972 and follows Caesar, who is the only talking ape on Earth. So the plot of this movie is that all cats and dogs are gone because they carried a deadly disease. So humans start using apes as their pets. Who comes up with this? They walk around with apes on leashes and whatnot. Some of the apes are locked up in cells and Caesar ends up there as well. This one is very similar to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, as it follows Caesar, the smartest ape, as he helps free other apes as they band together to fight against the humans. This was the best part of the movie. Roddy McDowall, who played the original Cornelius, plays Caesar now, his son, and he looks exactly like he did when he played Cornelius. It's like when Michael J. Fox played Marty McFly and Marty McFly Jr. in Back to the Future Part 2, and they look exactly the same because they're both played by Michael J. Fox, but in this, they have ape makeup all over their faces, so they didn't have to look exactly the same. Still, this one was more entertaining than the other sequels to me. It was a lot darker and serious, and we finally saw some actual conflict with the apes versus the humans. Battle for the Planet of the Apes came out in 1973 and follows Caesar as the leader and savior of the apes. He has a son named Cornelius, after his father. I definitely prefer the Andy Serkis Caesar to the Roddy McDowall Caesar. This Caesar never feels like he could lead an army like the Andy Serkis Caesar. He talks kind of funny.
From this day forward, my people
Nerd. This movie finally has some cool sets like the first two movies, which was something the third and fourth were missing. Then there's a bad guy gorilla who kills Cornelius, and he's the big bad of the movie. The gorillas keep the humans locked up, and Caesar has to free them. Then they fight on the tree, and Caesar has to kill him. Oh, the most nervous ape I've ever seen. It just felt lackluster to me. I wanted an epic finale and it kind of landed on a dud. Then, in 2001, Tim Burton rebooted the franchise with Mark Wahlberg as the astronaut who lands on the ape planet, and Helena Bonham Carter as an ape, and Tim Roth as the bad guy ape, and Paul Giamatti as the goofy ape. Now, is the ape makeup amazing in this movie? Yes. Is the acting good in this movie? No. Is the dialogue good in this movie? No. Is this a good movie? No. The acting is terrible, the dialogue is terrible, especially Mark Wahlberg's. I also don't understand why the humans can speak in this one. It makes it less believable that the apes have control of the planet if the humans are smart enough to talk. And then the Helena Bonham Carter ape gets all flirty with Mark Wahlberg, and it's really creepy. She's an ape, and he's a human guy. Besides the script and the acting, the movie looks fine and it's edited fine, but nothing in this is better than the original. Then we get to the ending. The ending is honestly fantastic. You think you're watching a boring, bland sci-fi movie with a shitty script, and then out of nowhere they drop this bomb on you. This is the twist of this century. When I saw this twist, I was so confused, I physically lost the ability to speak. I was just like those humans in the original movie that couldn't speak, and they just acted like monkeys. I was just sitting there with no comprehension to what I just witnessed. It was truly remarkable. So after Mark Wahlberg gets his ship and he comes back to Earth, he lands right next to the Lincoln Memorial. But as he looks up at Abe Lincoln's face, his face is the face of the ape that was the bad guy in the movie. The bad guy ape? Tim Roth? What the f***? Then a bunch of cops show up, and they are all apes too. What? So the Tim Roth ape went back in time before Mark Wahlberg and took control of the planet and changed history so that the apes are ruling Earth in present day. And then it ends. Okay? It makes no sense.
I got nothing.
The movie did fine financially, but not critically, so Fox decided to not move forward with any sequels. It's honestly a miracle any more Apes movies even happened. Rise of the Planet of the Apes came out in 2011 and was directed by Rupert Wyatt. It stars James Franco as Will, a scientist trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, and Andy Serkis, who brings a level of emotion into the character of Caesar that has never been done before. Will tests the drug on Caesar and raises him on his own. Caesar becomes very intelligent, but he eventually has to be taken to a primate shelter where the apes are held in cages. Draco Malfoy's in it, and he plays a prick who tortures the apes there. James Franco is pretty good in this movie. He's a pretty talented actor.
You gonna kill me like you killed my father?
Most of the time. This movie, as well as its sequels, have more action in them than the old movies, but they don't just focus on the action, they really focus on the character of Caesar, which is what makes these movies work so well. We care about him more than we cared about the apes from before. We care about him even more than the human characters from before. He eventually leads all the apes to rise up against the humans in an epic showdown on the Golden Gate Bridge. The action is great, and we really care about the characters, at least the ape characters. Where this movie really excels is the heart. The friendship between Will and Caesar is unlike anything we've seen in the franchise. It's really the strongest part of the movie. This movie stands on its own as a fantastic fantasy adventure, and it also sets up the trilogy perfectly. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was released in 2014 and begins by showing us a dystopian future 10 years after the events of Rise. This one was directed by Matt Reeves. He brings a much darker premise in comparison to the adventurous tone of the previous film. The visual effects in the first one were good, but this movie is on a whole nother level. This is seriously some of the best visual effects I've ever seen. The score by Michael Giacchino perfectly reflects the tense mood of the film. The acting is fantastic, especially from the apes, who steal the whole movie. The human characters are still great too, especially Gary Oldman, who I wish had more screen time. The villain, who was set up in the first film, is Koba. We've seen what apes have done to him. This has caused him to hate humans, and we can't really blame him. This movie covers many themes, including family, leadership, fear, loss, and vengeance, and it's done so well. And it's not just the storytelling elements, there's also an impressive amount of action spectacle. The battle between the apes and the humans at the end is ruthless. Incredible cinematography, visuals, and sound design. Caesar and Koba's fight at the end is emotional, thrilling, and heartbreaking. Overall, I think this is the best Planet of the Apes movie. It's got everything. It's got great drama and intense action, and it's directed masterfully. What I'm trying to say is, watch the movie. And the final entry in the Apes franchise, War for the Planet of the Apes, was released in 2017. It was co-written and directed by Matt Reeves once again. His darker tone from Dawn continues into this film. Everything in the previous two films led us to this. We find Caesar not only driven by a personal vendetta, but also haunted by nightmares for what he might become in his quest for revenge. He keeps seeing Koba in his dreams, scared that he might become just like him and blinded by hatred. The cinematography is once again beautiful. The cold color palette perfectly reflects the cold atmosphere and dramatic tone. Caesar's arc comes to a close at the end of this movie, and it's perfect. 3 bangers in a row. These 3 films make up one of the finest trilogies of all time. A strong, epic, and emotional journey. They're moving, thoughtful, and morally complex blockbusters, which you don't see often. So after watching all 9 movies, I have come up with my personal ranking of the Planet of the Apes franchise. So here we go from worst to best. Tim Burton, Battle, Escape, Beneath, Conquest, Rise, War, Original, Dawn.